Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast by the Virtual Foundry. This is Volume 2, Episode 9. Today, we're going to be talking about sintering crucibles. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Tricia Cease. I'm the president of the Virtual Foundry. And with me, as always, is Brad Woods, our CEO, our inventor, our all-around science guy. Say hello, Brad.
Hi, everybody.
I want to let you know that today is Friday, June 11th, 2021. The time is 11:05 in the morning, and the temperature outside is a very warm 89 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Celsius. I've been talking about wanting those spring temperatures to come along, and I think they were here for about one weekend, and then we jumped right into summertime. So here we go. As I said, today we're talking about a new kind of sintering crucible that has been developed by the Virtual Foundry. So currently we sell alumina crucibles in our shop in a 300 milliliter size, a 500 milliliter size, and we also sell a graphite crucible that's a little bit larger than those. And the sintering process, the debind and sintering process that we have published on our website was developed using those alumina crucibles. So that's why it was important for us to make those available to you. But we're expanding that option. We'll be keeping those same options and then expanding into some crucibles that Brad has developed here within the Virtual Foundry. So we're going to talk about why we did that a little bit. What are some of the benefits of these new crucibles that are being made, and sort of where we are in the process. So if you need a larger crucible, especially made of alumina, they can be very difficult to find and also very expensive. So that's one of the primary reasons that we wanted to develop our own shape and size of crucible. So Brad, walk us through the benefits of making our own when we're talking about mass, shape, color, size.
I think it's mostly about control over the process, and part of, and a not unimportant part of this is controlling the flow of products. We've had, like during COVID and over the past year, we found it difficult to source these alumina crucibles at times, and we've been out of stock a few times, and they're just not easy to come by. To be clear, you can go out to Amazon or eBay and you can order smaller ones. Those are not a problem to source. But the 300 milliliter ones aren't too bad. When you get to the 500 milliliter crucibles, it gets more difficult. And when you go beyond that, the cost exponentiates. And by the time you hit a liter, you can be spending $1,000 on an alumina crucible. So by developing our own, we kind of clear up the supply chain issues, which was important to us. But the key benefits are that we make a vessel that is specifically designed for the way that our users are using them. And a couple of the key benefits are a little bit more mass to them, so it spreads the heat around the crucible more evenly. And part of the design here is with the intent of it being more thermally conductive than the alumina. The idea being that you have a more uniform heat profile inside of the crucible itself.
And talk about the shape that you designed. What is the benefit of using more of a cylindrical shape than the more bell shape that our current crucibles offer?
Right. So this is another problem. The bell-shaped alumina crucibles don't make very efficient use of the small firing chambers that our users tend to use. So I have a couple photos here. Let me pull those up. So here's a photo of one of the 500 milliliter alumina crucibles in a Paragon SC2. And the problem is you can fit only one of them in there. So you have a very large amount of wasted space. So we've optimized the size and shape of the crucibles that we're putting out there to overcome this. So for example, not the best example, but an example. So these are two smaller crucibles that have nearly the same usable volume as the last photo that I showed, but you can fit twice as many of them into the kiln. And you may actually be able to fit a third if you were kind of careful there. Right now, the largest one we sell is the 500 milliliter. This one on the left is a photo. We don't quite have the volume of it figured out, but it's about 3/4 of a liter, somewhere in there, maybe a little bit higher. In this photo, the one on the left will be our largest crucible that we certainly currently sell. On the right side here, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse pointer or not, but this is the 500 milliliter Aluma crucible.
So the smaller white one is our standard 500 milliliter Aluma crucible.
Yes, and the one on the left is about 3/4, but uses up, over 75% of the firing chamber on a Paragon SC2.
So as we're looking at this photo, the only crucible that you did not make in this photo is the smaller white one. The 3 dark colored ones and the large white one were all made here at the Virtual Foundry.
That's correct. And the one on the left is not fired yet. That's still in a green state. But the other ones have cycled through our kilns dozens of times. And so they're proving to be very, very resilient. We haven't had one fail yet, so we don't exactly know what the lifespan is going to be. But at this point, we're confident that the life cycle of the ones that we're making are at least equal to the Aluma crucibles.
What difference does that shape make? You talked about being able to make better use of the kiln space. Is the straight up and down cylindrical shape providing any additional benefit?
A little bit. The bell-shaped Aluma crucibles, yeah, the bottom part of the crucible isn't very usable anyway, because it's quite small, so you can't put much in there. If you're firing something vertical, it works out okay. Excuse me. These are cylindrical from top to bottom, so a uniform shape all the way through it, just a little bit easier to deal with. And this isn't happening at the moment, but as we go forward, we'll introduce different shapes. And, so for example, I'm working on one that basically mimics the shape of the firing chamber of the SC2 or the SC3 or what have you.
So tell us about the color. The ones that you made here, we can see are a very dark color. What is the benefit of that? Or why did you use that color in particular?
Right. We've actually noticed that there's enough of a difference in the heat absorption between the black and the Aluma to make a difference in the sintering cycle. So exactly the same parameters with, let me put these back on my screen. So exactly the same parameters with the black ones get substantially warmer more quickly than the white ones do. And the effect is actually is much more substantial than I thought was even possible. So in our sintering cycles, we're dealing with variations in temperatures as low as, say, 15 degrees Celsius will have an impact on the final product. So these are just meant to be more consistent.
Now, you've gone through quite a process to get these things made.
Right. A better solution is something I actually started working on this a few years ago. So in this box of failed crucibles labeled here, it's all kinds of different strategies I attempted. They're different clay body recipes. They're different levels of things like boric acid or borax or sodium silicate. Sodium silicate is an important ingredient in all of this stuff. It's they call it water glass. But so, for example, this one right here, I took a piece of fire brick and I soaked it with sodium silicate and sintered it. When I started, I thought this was a great idea. I thought I would just take fire bricks and route them out on my mill, carefully, dust conscious, of course, and use that as a crucible. But the immediate problem is that the insulating fire bricks are highly porous, so gases would just pass through the sides. So my next step was to fill in the pores. So I soaked it with sodium silicate, and it kind of worked, but it just wasn't easy to reproduce, and it was kind of a hassle. So that was when I switched, and we're going to share the recipe with this publicly. So this is the technical data for the green stripe clay. And you can see it's simple. It's mostly silica, some alumina, and a bit of iron oxide. To that, we use 80% of the green stripe clay by mass, and then to that we'll add 20% powdered Pyrex, so powdered borosilicate. And this stuff's easy to come by online. You can, it's just recycled lab glass and things like that, and it's used for a lot of different industrial purposes. So it can be had for just a few dollars a pound. So the winning recipe in the end here turned out to be 80% green stripe clay, 20% Pyrex, and about, I didn't think of it by percentage, but just literally a few tablespoons of sodium silicate. The sodium silicate may not be necessary if you're not doing the slip casting technique. So these I mixed up, we mix the clay into a slurry, pour it into molds. Come on, I have them here. We wind up with a very nice, vessel. This one. So this wheel that it's sitting on is called a banding wheel, and it's just a little turntable. And the idea is you coil build. So you roll pieces of clay into long cylinders, and then you stack them up and go in circles until you build up the clay body into the shape that you're looking for. So that's how I made the first one. So literally just crudely hand-shaped clay. So that's one simple way to do it. If somebody were to try this at home, way easier than slip casting. The reason we went to slip casting is so that we can produce these things at scale. So we need to make, dozens and dozens and dozens of these. So that was our motivation there. But you could likely, if you knew a potter, they could likely throw this on a wheel, and a good potter can make one of these in maybe 3 minutes. So they can produce them pretty quickly. So any method you can use of forming clay will work for this recipe. It's just clay.
So once you've got the shape, then you're going through a first firing process.
Yep.
And what happens when it comes out of that first fire?
Right. Okay, so when it goes into the first fire, it's highly porous, and it's just particles of silica, alumina, and glass in our recipe. During the first firing, which is the bisque firing, the reason it shrinks by 25% is that it's densifying. So we go from a highly porous object to a nearly solid object during the firing process. And the firing of ceramics is incredibly analogous to the sintering of metals. There's so much crossover that it's actually much more interesting than I expected when I started this project. So you deal with some of the same issues of densification and shrinkage and all those kind of things. But during this first phase of the firing, like I said, the part shrinks, it becomes dense, it goes through a process called vitrification, where the crystals grow and form, and it becomes a solid, and they're extremely strong. So it's somewhere between a glass and a ceramic. And yeah, that's the bisque firing process.
So the status of the Crucible project now is that we do have some of these new Crucible shapes out for beta testing with some of our users. They're working on it. We're also firing our own in-house over and over and over to make sure that they stand the test of time. Once they are proven out, we will begin to produce and stock these crucibles in our store. Now we'll be beginning with some standard shapes. Down the road, we may be able to offer some custom shapes, but the first rollout will be a standard stock of shapes. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this, getting a little bit more detail and insight to the process, there is a YouTube video that Brad made, and I'll attach a link to that in the description of this video. There's also more discussion about making your own crucibles in our user forum. And we will also post the recipe that Brad mentioned today in that user forum. I'll include links to those in the descriptions of this video.
Right, and there are lots of good reasons to make a crucible specifically for some project that you may be working on. If it's a project where you plan to produce hundreds of them or something like that, this is the ideal solution. Make a sintering vessel that's specifically designed for the part that you're working on.
So we are excited to offer these crucibles because it gives people more options, and we're able to get larger sizes that are more accessible for people. They'll be made right here in the US and available in our store. So Brad, I have one more very important question for you before we wrap up.
All right.
Why couldn't the pony sing a lullaby?
I don't know.
Because she was a little hoarse.
Nice.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on our podcast talking about sintering crucibles, and we'll see you next time.